After a long summer, the NBA season is finally here, and boy, do we have plenty to talk about. This offseason, we've seen some blockbuster trades, generational Olympic performances, and drafted a whole new cast of rookies looking to make an impact. Tonight, we're going to take a deep dive into who we think are the frontrunners for each conference, talk about some of our favorite rookies from this year's draft, ask which team has made the best moves in the offseason, and more. Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm your host, Chris Vadnais, joined by the incredible Julia Henry and Nate Johns. Now let's get right on into it. Now, we've seen a lot of off-season trades and free agent signings for really high-level players. And the first thing I want to know from the two of you is who do you think, which team specifically, has had the best offseason, has put themselves in the best position to be competitive this year? Nate, I'm going to send it over to you first.
Well, you talk about putting yourself in a position to be competitive, and who better to start with than with the reigning, defending, undisputed NBA champion Boston Celtics. They put themselves in a great position to be competitive this year, and in the long term. They brought back Jaylen Brown, they brought back Jason Tatum on max contract extensions, Derek White got a contract extension, so they're really just running it back with the cast that they had from last year, but they did make one addition that I really wanted to point out. It wasn't in free agency, it was through the draft. They brought in Baylor Shireman, the sharpshooter out of Creighton. If there's one thing every NBA team needs, it's a guy who can come in and shoot. Shireman's going to come in, knock down threes. Did that for his whole entire career at Creighton, and I'm very excited to see what he could do. He'll probably come off the bench role, maybe be a little bit like the Sam Hauser role last year, spark plug kind of guy, give them some minutes off the bench. And then I wanted to take a look at a team out west that did make a big free agent signing, and it was the OKC Thunder. I'm going to talk about them quite a bit. And when we look at the Thunder, the biggest problem they had last year was their rim protection, because Chet Holmgren is very good. He's a very talented basketball player, great offensively, but he got bullied by bigger, stronger offensive centers, and they fixed that. They brought in Isaiah Hartenstein from the Knicks, gave him a 5-year contract this offseason, and that allows Holmgren to move back to his natural position of power forward, and it allows them to have an option for containing guys like Nikola Jokic, like Rudy Gobert, that you're going to see every night in the Western Conference. So those were my two teams that came away even better than they were prior to the offseason.
Those teams definitely made some big offseason moves, but I kind of want to talk about two teams that worked in tandem with each other, the Minnesota Timberwolves and those New York Knicks. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they drafted Karl-Anthony Towns #1 in 2015, and they finally sent him all the way out east over to New York in this offseason, so it'll definitely be interesting to see how he does there. And the Timberwolves, they found themselves in the Western Conference Finals. They kind of get some of those Nova Knicks breakup, end up on their team. So they look to add those key role players, key stars to their team. And last year they finished #1 defensively, and they still bring back that defensive core and Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert. And then the Knicks, the big question for them is how Karl-Anthony Towns fits in the beginning of this season. Because out at Minnesota, he played power forward, but Mitchell Robinson is still out dealing with that foot surgery recovery time. Precious Achiuwa looks like he'll miss the first couple weeks of the season. So kind of how Karl-Anthony Towns will do as a center will be interesting to see in that first couple of weeks.
Yeah, and along with signings and trades, we've had some opportunities in the Summer League and in the preseason to see some of this new rookie class that came in. I would say we've definitely had an interesting draft, and I just want to know what are one of your favorite rookies, one or two, that you are keeping an eye out for this season. Julie, I'm going to send it over to you first.
I got to talk about Dalton Knecht. Sorry, but the rookie to watch on the Lakers isn't going to be Bronny. Dalton Knecht comes out of Tennessee, and his college career is really interesting. Started at a JUCO, went to Northern Colorado, spent that last season, his 5th and final year of eligibility at Tennessee, became SEC Player of the Year, SEC Newcomer of the Year, and he was drafted 17th, and he's 23 years old. So I think that's something to consider, is he's not necessarily your typical rookie. And he did well in the Summer League. He was the second highest points per game scored among all the rookies, with averaging about 20 points per game, shot about 40% from the field beyond the arc. So especially this Lakers team with J.J. Redick and that first-year head coach, it'll be really interesting to see their identity as a team, very likely a play-in team. So I think Dalton Knecht is the guy to watch.
Yeah, I really like Dalton Knecht. I like what I've seen from him so far. And I'm going to talk about a player that's kind of in a similar situation in terms of his draft stock, in terms of his age, and that's Tyler Kolek of the New York Knicks. Kolek, of course, the Big East Player of the Year in 2022-23 out of Marquette, came in from Delaware and goes in the second round, drafted by the Trailblazers. Draft rights went to the Knicks on draft night. And he's going to be your very typical backup point guard. He's going to have a role right away. He's going to be able to spell Jalen Brunson, and he's just elite offensively. Great passer, great distributor of the basketball, can get it to all those three-point wings that New York has been stacking up over the offseason. And even now, with Karl Anthony Towns and his ability to take those three-pointers, Kolek is going to be able to feed him. And we know Tom Thibodeau, he's very demanding defensively, so I'm not too worried about Kolek's defensive downgrade from Brunson, because Brunson, of course, when you're surrounded by a Tom Thibodeau-led defense, guys like Josh Hart, guys like Mikal Bridges, you're still going to be able to be successful, and he's going to have that offensive role ready to go for him. I think he's going to fit in flawlessly in New York, and I'm very excited to see how he fits in on this New York Knicks team that is going to be competing for a championship this year.
Yeah, we've seen trades. We've seen free agent signings. We've seen a draft. A lot has happened. A lot of teams look very, very different. And so I need to know, who do you have as the favorite in each conference? Nate, you're up first.
Well, I'm going to start out East like I did last time, and I'm going to go with the Boston Celtics. I mean, they had an easy path to the finals last year. They didn't really change anything. They brought the gang back together. They added Baylor Shireman, so there wasn't too much rocking of the boat. And that's what's really important for these teams is roster cohesion. And these Boston guys, they've played together for a few years now. A lot of them were there for the 2022 championship series. A lot of them were on that team for last year. In fact, almost all of them were there for last year's championship series. In fact, they only lost one player in free agency. And then going out west, I'm going to look at the Thunder once again. Again, not a big sort of change made there. They did improve their team defensively, but more importantly, I just have questions about every one of the Western Conference contenders. I mean, Phoenix, they don't really have a ton of depth behind Beal, Katie, and Booker. Looking at Denver, they lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, which I think that's going to be a bigger loss for them than a lot of people are going to realize. Minnesota, the Karl Anthony Towns trade, I heard this said, and I agreed with it. It signifies more that they're looking to extend their window long-term and not necessarily compete this year. And finally, with the Mavericks, they brought in Klay Thompson, which I think is a good addition, but I do have my concerns that the fall-off we saw from Thompson last year is a sign of things that could be coming for him. So I'm going to go with the Celtics and the Thunder for my favorites.
I exactly agree with that, Nate. And to me, the Celtics, again, that roster contingency, the only concern I have for them is at that center position. Al Horford, he had a great season last year, but he is 38. At some point, the tank's got to run out of gas. And Kristaps Porzingis still dealing with injury, so they don't have him there. And then I agree with you again on the Thunder. They're such a young, strong team, and they have the reigning Coach of the Year. So I really think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and all of that young talent will definitely help them be that contender in the West.
I like what you guys just said, coming from a Boston fan. I think we're going back to back, but I know we haven't seen a single game tip-off yet. But if you had to tell me right now who the 2025 NBA champions are going to be, what is it? Julia, what do you got for me?
I got to go with the Dallas Mavericks. It's finally Luka Doncic's year, and I think they made that big acquisition in Klay Thompson, and he's the missing piece. Last season, they shot a lot of corner threes, but were 28th in the league from completion on them. Thompson has shot about 40% beyond the arc throughout his whole career, so I think he's really that missing puzzle piece that will lead the Mavs to a 2025 title.
And I'm just, once again, going to go back to what's been working for me so far. I'm going to go with the Thunder. Once again, I think they found their missing piece, and Isaiah Hartenstein really shored up that defense because the West does run through a lot of very talented centers, like we talked about. Anthony Davis on the Lakers, too, especially given the fact he will probably be healthy for when the playoffs roll around. But also, looking at this Thunder team, again, they have the roster cohesion, and they have one of the best players in the NBA in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, he was an MVP finals last year. He had a ton of big playoff games, especially in that Dallas series, even though they didn't come out on top. And that was really, I think, a learning experience here for them. They were the #1 seed, and I think that we could see them hoisting the trophy in June.
I like what you guys have said, but as a Boston fan, I got to go with my C's. But listen, we've talked about a lot tonight, and I'm certain we're going to have much more to talk about as soon as the 2024-2025 NBA season tips off Tuesday night in Boston. For For Julia Henry and Nate Johns, I'm Chris Vadnais. Thank you so much for watching Penn State Sports Night, and have a great week.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind the scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.